Have you ever felt like something inside you was watching, waiting, quietly shaping your life from behind the scenes, that no matter how hard you try to move forward, some invisible force pulls you back into the same patterns, the same fears, the same emptiness? What if I told you that force has a name? Most people live their entire lives haunted by something they can't explain. A restlessness, a weight in the chest, a voice in the silence. They chase distractions, relationships, success, but still feel like strangers to themselves. That's not by accident, that's the shadow, and no, it's not evil. It's not here to destroy you. It's the part of you that you were never allowed to become. And unless you face it, unless you bring it to light, you'll never truly be free. Carl Jung believed that the greatest danger to humanity is not war, not politics, not even death. It's the ignorance of oneself. And in this video, we're going to uncover exactly how the psychology of the shadow holds the key to your deepest fears and your greatest transformation. This isn't just about understanding your mind. It's about reclaiming your soul, reconnecting with the universe, and accessing the mystical truth that's been buried inside you all along. But before we begin, let me ask you something. Are you truly living your life, or just surviving it? Because once you learn how to face your inner darkness, you'll never look at yourself or the world the same way again. This journey isn't for everyone. It's for those who feel the silent pull of something deeper, those who know that the path to light always leads through the dark. And one last thing, a lot of people watch our videos and still aren't subscribed. If this content speaks to your soul, if you feel that this is a space where your spirit can grow, then subscribe to Celestial Truths right now and join this journey of awakening. You're not alone. And what you're about to discover might just change everything. There is a silent force that shapes the course of humanity, and it does not come from outside. It rises instead from the hidden corridors of the human psyche. Carl Jung, a mystic of the unconscious mind, warned us long ago. The greatest peril does not reside in wars, governments, or even natural disasters. It dwells in the unseen, the parts of ourselves we refuse to know. To ignore who you truly are is to live possessed by invisible hands. The unexamined self becomes a breeding ground for chaos, casting shadows not only over individual lives, but over entire civilizations. And so the journey begins with a haunting truth. If you do not turn inward, the darkness will come find you, disguised, seductive, and destructive. So many souls walk this earth wrapped in illusions, believing the enemy is somewhere out there. They blame the universe, fate, or others, unaware that the real war is an inner one. Every unconscious impulse left in the dark becomes a ticking time bomb, a shadow, waiting to erupt, a sudden rage, a silent resentment, a subtle manipulation. These are not random. They are whispers from the unconscious, fragments of the unacknowledged self crying out for integration. The danger lies in this ignorance, not stupidity, but a lack of deep spiritual awareness. Without the courage to face the mirror of the psyche, one becomes lost in a maze of projections and fears, pulled by forces they cannot name. The path of self-knowledge is not about fixing what is broken. It is about remembering what was forgotten. There is a sacred dimension to looking inward, a kind of mystical unveiling. The universe speaks through symbols, through dreams, through synchronicities that beckon us to pay attention. But if the inner eyes remain shut, we miss the signs. We live disconnected from our essence, alienated from the self, haunted by a restlessness we cannot soothe. This is not merely psychological, it is deeply spiritual. To ignore oneself is to live in exile from the soul, and in that exile the shadow festers. It feeds on denial and grows stronger until it no longer hides. You see, the unconscious is not evil. It is primal, raw, and full of untapped wisdom, but it demands reverence. It demands that we stop pretending. When we deny it, it retaliates. And this retaliation can manifest in countless ways: toxic relationships, compulsive behaviors, unexplained anxieties, or even a haunting sense of emptiness. These are not random misfortunes. They are symptoms of a soul trying to get your attention. Jung believed that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will rule our lives, and we will call it fate. To awaken, then, is to turn within and ask, what part of me have I been afraid to meet? This is where the seeker's journey truly begins. Not in temples or in books, but in the brave act of observing oneself with honesty, to sit in silence and listen to what arises from within, to watch your reactions like clouds passing through the sky, and dare to ask why. This is how one becomes a spiritual alchemist, not by escaping the shadow but by illuminating it. This is not easy, but it is sacred. The universe is not outside of you, it is within, echoing through your thoughts, your feelings, your fears. The deeper you go, the more you'll see. The only way out is in, and as the veil begins to lift, we are led to a deeper question. What exactly is this shadow we carry? Deep within the architecture of the psyche, there is a hidden chamber, a sacred space locked by fear, shame, and societal conditioning. This is where the shadow resides. Carl Jung, with the eyes of a mystic and the mind of a depth psychologist, unveiled this powerful archetype. The shadow is not merely the dark side of a person, but the totality of everything we reject, repress, or deny about ourselves. Every time we think, "I'm not like that," or "I could never do that," we are, perhaps unknowingly, feeding this mysterious force. And the less we acknowledge it, the more power it gains, operating in secrecy, distorting perception, sabotaging relationships, and creating a false sense of control. The shadow is composed of instincts, emotions, and qualities that we, or the world around us, deemed unacceptable. It can hold rage, envy, lust, laziness, selfishness, but it also holds qualities we may have buried out of fear, assertiveness, wildness, sensuality, even our capacity for brilliance. What's hidden is not necessarily bad. It's simply what we learned we were not allowed to be. Imagine a child who's told they're too much, too emotional, or too loud. That child grows, but inside them, a shadow begins to form. The voice quiets, but never disappears. It waits, behind the curtain of the persona, ready to emerge when triggered by life. What most people don't realize is that the shadow is not an enemy. It is a mirror, a gateway, a secret guide. In spiritual terms, it is the guardian of transformation. In mystical traditions, the monster at the door is always the protector of the treasure. The shadow carries the energy of the universe, waiting to be transmuted, raw, wild, and full of potential. But if we continue to suppress it, it becomes dense and destructive. Think of a volcano. The longer the pressure builds, the more explosive the eruption. The same principle applies to the psyche. Suppressed emotions don't die. They go underground, and from there, they govern us. This is why sudden outbursts, passive-aggressive comments, or mysterious self-sabotage often feel like they come out of nowhere, but they don't. They come from the shadow, the unseen part of us that has been begging for a voice. And this voice speaks in symbols, in dreams, in projections. When we harshly judge others, we are often seeing in them what we've disowned in ourselves. That's projection, a core dynamic of the shadow. The universe, in its infinite wisdom, reflects back to us what we are unwilling to face internally. And so the people we dislike the most may be spiritual messengers in disguise, sent to reveal the parts of us we have abandoned. To walk the path of individuation, the mystical integration of the self, we must first acknowledge that we are not only what we show to the world, we are also what we hide. And herein lies the paradox. The more we run from the shadow, the more control it gains. But when we begin to observe it, dialogue with it, understand its origins, it softens. It reveals secrets. It becomes a partner in our expansion, not a threat. And this revelation opens the next door in our journey. How exactly is the shadow born within us? The answer, as always, begins in the earliest stages of our story, the silent chapters of childhood. The personal shadow is not born from evil. It is shaped by experience. From the moment a soul enters this world, it begins to adapt. A child, pure and untamed, expresses the totality of its being. It screams, desires, explores, resists. But quickly it learns. Some emotions are welcome, others are not. Praise is given for being nice, quiet, obedient. Disapproval comes when instincts surge, anger, jealousy, defiance. And so begins the slow burial of the true self. Each suppressed feeling, each censored impulse, each trait labeled as wrong, gets tucked away, hidden behind the mask we create to survive. Thus, the shadow is born, not as a flaw, but as a reaction to an unsupportive world. Think of a child told, "Don't cry," every time they feel overwhelmed. Eventually, they stop crying, but they also stop feeling. The emotion doesn't vanish, it retreats into the unconscious. Now, as an adult, they may struggle with empathy, intimacy, or sudden explosions of rage that seem out of character. These aren't random. They are the return of what was once pushed away. The shadow becomes a secret container, holding what the conscious mind has deemed unacceptable. But unlike a forgotten drawer, it doesn't stay closed. It leaks in sarcasm, in addiction, in chronic indecision. The soul yearns to be whole, and what's repressed will find a way to be seen. Culture and family play a pivotal role in shaping the shadow. In some households, ambition is admired. In others, it's condemned as arrogance. In some cultures, obedience is prized above all. In others, emotional expression is taboo. Each person, depending on where and how they were raised, internalizes different messages about what is okay to be. And so, the formation of the personal shadow is deeply individual yet universally human. It's the mystical wound we all carry, a byproduct of being social beings in a world that fears authenticity. But hidden within that wound is also the key to transcendence. Jung understood that what we repress most fiercely is often where our deepest spiritual power lies. The child who repressed their anger might carry a fierce inner protector. The one who hid their curiosity may hold a wild, visionary spirit. The shadow is not simply dark, it is full of buried light. Spirituality, in its truest sense, invites us to reclaim this forgotten energy. The universe calls us to wholeness, and to get there, we must return to the places we abandoned. Through dreams, through writing, through mystical observation of our triggers, we can begin to remember what we once rejected and welcome it home. But this remembering is not easy. It requires patience, self-compassion, and the willingness to be honest with oneself. When you feel an overreaction rise, an emotion too intense for the situation, pause. Ask, whose voice is this? What part of me is being reawakened? These questions aren't just psychological, they are spiritual rituals of return. Each insight, each recognition, is a step closer to integration. And as we begin to uncover our personal shadow, we realize it doesn't exist in isolation. It is intertwined with deeper layers of the psyche, with archetypes, with inner structures, with forgotten forces that silently shape who we are becoming. To navigate the inner world is to enter a labyrinth of sacred architecture. Within the psyche, Jung revealed, live multiple forces, each with its own voice, function, and longing. These are not mere concepts, but living energies. The ego is the conscious I, the part of you that thinks, decides, remembers your name, your goals, your roles. It is necessary, like the rudder of a ship, but it is not the captain, nor the ocean. And here lies the illusion most people fall into, mistaking the ego for the totality of who they are. When the ego inflates, it builds walls. When it collapses, it drowns in chaos. It must learn its place as servant, not master. Beyond the ego lies the self, the central archetype of wholeness. The self is the silent observer, the still point within, the mystical thread that connects all parts of your being. It includes both the conscious and the unconscious, both the light and the shadow. It is your inner universe, vast and unknowable but always guiding. Many confuse the self with the personality or intellect, but the self is deeper. It speaks in dreams, in intuition, in synchronicities. When you're aligned with it, you feel peace that has no cause. When you're estranged from it, life feels hollow, even when everything seems fine on the surface. The spiritual path, in truth, is the return to the self. But between the ego and the world, another figure stands, the persona. This is the mask, the version of you carefully constructed to gain acceptance and survive in society. We all wear one. It's not false, it's adaptive. The problem begins when we forget it's a mask. When the persona becomes fused with the ego, we become performers in our own lives, seeking applause instead of truth. Many spiritual seekers reach a point of exhaustion, not because life is hard, but because the persona no longer fits. It's a spiritual claustrophobia. the soul knocking on the walls of its disguise. And often this knocking comes in the form of crisis. Deeper still, within the inner temple of the psyche, we encounter the anima and the animus, the archetypal feminine and masculine within each person. These energies are not tied to gender, but to cosmic balance. The anima is the feminine soul image in men, intuitive, emotional, creative, connected to the universe's cyclical rhythms. The animus is the masculine soul image in women, assertive, logical, structured, and purposeful. When unconscious, these forces distort, turning into mood swings, projections, or emotional dependencies. But when integrated, they become spiritual allies, helping the seeker embody wholeness beyond duality. To meet them is to enter a mystical marriage within, the sacred union of opposites. Each of these structures, ego, self, persona, anima, animus, holds a piece of your truth, but they can also act as barriers. Sometimes the ego fears the shadow, the persona hides it, the anima, animus, projects it onto others, and all the while the self waits, patient, silent, watching. Integration begins when we no longer fight these parts, but learn to listen, to sit with them in silence, to honor their roles without letting them dominate. This inner dialogue, this spiritual introspection, opens a portal to the deeper mystery, that we are not fragmented beings, but sacred symphonies learning how to remember our original harmony. And from this harmony, we begin to glimpse the shadow not just within ourselves, but mirrored in the world. When an individual represses a part of themselves, a personal shadow is formed. But what happens when an entire society does the same? When a culture, generation after generation, refuses to face its own fears, prejudices, and hidden desires? This Jung called the collective shadow, a force far more dangerous and insidious than individual ignorance. It moves like a dark current beneath the surface of civilization, whispering through ideologies, institutions, and inherited traumas. It is the unspoken rage in the crowd, the cold violence in laws, the mystical blindness of a people who have forgotten their soul. It is not them, it is us, mirrored and multiplied. The collective shadow is born when a society builds its identity upon denial of emotion, of failure, of vulnerability. In this denial, what doesn't fit the image is pushed outward, onto scapegoats. Suddenly, the enemy becomes the other. A race, a gender, a class, a belief. History is littered with these projections: witch hunts, genocide, systemic racism, colonialism, religious wars. These are not anomalies. They are the eruption of the collective shadow, bursting through the seams of repression. When we see others as less human, it is the unconscious justifying cruelty. When we create us versus them, we are dancing with the archetype of the shadow on a global stage. And just like the personal shadow, the collective shadow does not disappear. Through denial, it only grows stronger. It hides in silence, in tradition, in just the way things are. But the universe, always moving toward expansion, will not allow what is unconscious to remain forever hidden. That is why we see certain patterns repeat, over decades, over centuries. The same injustices, the same collective amnesia. And yet, beneath this cycle lies an invitation, a mystical chance to break the loop. But for that, we must first recognize that we are not separate from the world we criticize. The shadow of society reflects the fragments within each of us. To face the collective shadow is an act of sacred rebellion. It begins not in revolutions of fire, but in revolutions of awareness. When we dare to look at history with honest eyes, not to shame but to remember, we begin to restore what was fractured. Healing collective wounds requires both inner and outer work. It means questioning inherited beliefs, noticing how unconscious bias lives in our language, our judgments, our silences. It means listening to those long ignored and allowing their pain to enter our hearts. True spirituality is not a retreat from the world, but a return to it, with awakened eyes and a soul that refuses to look away. So, how does one begin this path? It starts with small revolutions of consciousness, catching the moment when you project blame, observing how you speak about those who are different, reflecting on what makes you uncomfortable, and why. Through these simple practices, the collective shadow begins to loosen its grip. It is not healed by shame, but by recognition. And in that recognition, we open a portal, not only for personal transformation, but for collective liberation. Yet this is only the beginning. For even after recognition, there remains a greater task: integration. How can we bring this shadow into the light, not as an enemy to defeat, but as a force to transmute? To integrate the shadow is not to destroy it. It is to embrace what was once exiled, and in doing so reclaim your wholeness. Jung understood this as a sacred process, not a psychological fix, but a spiritual alchemy. Integration is not about becoming good. It is about becoming real. The universe does not reward perfection. It responds to authenticity. And authenticity is born when we stop pretending, when we stop hiding behind masks of light and allow the darkness within us to speak. Not to rule us, but to teach us. Because the shadow is not a curse. It is a mirror, a guide, a forgotten part of the soul waiting to be remembered. Most people fear this work because they believe it will destroy them. But the opposite is true. What truly poisons the spirit is repression, the daily act of denying who you are. When you finally allow yourself to see the anger, the envy, the grief, the chaos, something incredible happens. It softens. It reveals its roots. Often, the most destructive impulses are distorted cries for love, protection, or truth. Behind every shadow is an unmet need, a wound that was never allowed to speak. And in the silence of introspection, when we sit with that pain instead of rejecting it, we become healers of our own inner universe. Integration is also a return to power. So much energy is lost trying to hide parts of ourselves. We become tired, fragmented, anxious, not because life is too much, but because we are at war with who we are. The moment you begin to honor your shadow, to learn from it, to dance with it, you reclaim that lost vitality. You become more creative, more intuitive, more alive. You stop reacting unconsciously and begin to respond from a place of awareness. The shadow becomes your ally, your protector, your compass. In mystic terms, this is when the dragon becomes the guardian of the treasure, no longer something to slay but to understand. But make no mistake, integration is not a single event. It is a lifelong practice. There will be days when the shadow rises with fury, and others when it feels like a silent ghost. The work is to remain present, to meet whatever comes with honesty and compassion. Dreams become sacred messages. Emotional triggers become teachers. Conversations become mirrors. Every encounter is a chance to see more of yourself, to uncover the part still longing to be brought into the light. This is the mystical nature of the universe. It conspires to awaken you again and again in the most unexpected ways. And as you walk this path of inner healing, you begin to notice something miraculous. The more you integrate your shadow, the more whole you feel. And the more whole you feel, the less you fear others. Judgment dissolves, projection fades, empathy grows. You begin to recognize the same wounds in others that once lived inside you. This is where true connection begins, where spiritual maturity is born. And this leads us naturally into the next layer of the journey. How do we confront the shadow when it appears? What tools can we use to bring it into consciousness and begin this sacred process of transformation? Facing the shadow is not a battle, it's a ritual. It requires presence, intention, and above all, honesty. The path to integration begins with emotional self-observation, the sacred art of noticing. Every reaction is a clue. Every emotional spike, every resentment, every irrational fear is a whisper from the unconscious. The spiritual seeker becomes a watcher of their own inner weather, learning to recognize the winds of a projection and the storms of suppressed memory. In this mystical practice, even discomfort becomes a doorway. The key is to observe without judgment, to feel without fleeing. The universe speaks through your emotions. They are not interruptions, but messages. Another powerful tool is dream analysis. The dream world is the language of the unconscious, the realm where shadow symbols roam freely. Night after night, the psyche offers images, scenarios, and archetypal encounters that bypass the ego and speak directly to the soul. A monster chasing you might represent repressed anger. A crumbling house could symbolize an outdated belief system. Dreams are not random. They are deeply spiritual messages from your inner universe. To work with dreams is to become a translator of your soul. writing them down upon waking, meditating on their meaning, and allowing the symbols to unfold over time. The shadow always leaves clues in the night. The practice of reflective journaling is also essential. Writing is a bridge between the conscious mind and the unconscious depths. When you write without censoring, without trying to sound wise or good, your inner truths begin to rise. Ask yourself, what am I afraid of? What do I refuse to feel? What am I projecting onto others? These questions are not just therapeutic, they are mystical incantations, summoning the hidden aspects of your being to step into the light. Through consistent journaling, patterns emerge. You begin to see the same, wounds echoing through different experiences. That is when you know you've touched the shadow's pulse. Another sacred method is the recognition of projection. We often think we're responding to people or situations, but in truth, we're reacting to our own disowned parts reflected back at us. That person you can't stand, look closer. What quality do they embody that you deny in yourself? This is not easy. It requires humility, but it is deeply liberating. Recognizing projection is like lifting a veil. Suddenly, you see yourself in everyone and everyone in you. It's a mystical moment of unity, and when you catch yourself projecting, you don't need to punish yourself. Simply name it, witness it. This is how unconscious patterns begin to dissolve. Finally, there is the practice of radical self-honesty. Not brutal, not shameful, but honest, in the sense of being willing to sit in the silence and ask, where am I not being true? This honesty is not for the world. It is for yourself. It is a sacred communion. You can lie to others and play roles, but the universe and your soul knows the truth. When you start telling that truth to yourself without filters, you awaken. This is the gateway to true spiritual growth. And as you walk this path, you'll realize that facing the shadow isn't about darkness. It's about becoming whole. And this realization prepares the seeker for the final revelation. The shadow is not just personal. It is part of a moral, spiritual, and collective journey of evolution. To confront the shadow is not simply an inner exercise. It is a moral act, a spiritual calling, a collective responsibility. In a universe where everything is interconnected, the healing of one soul ripples through the fabric of existence. Jung taught that the process of individuation, the mystical path toward becoming whole, is not a selfish pursuit. It is a sacred offering to the world. When you illuminate your own darkness, you decrease the weight of unconsciousness in the collective. You become a beacon, not by shining light alone, but by having the courage to sit with your own darkness without fear, without shame, without running. Every time you choose to face what you fear in yourself, the resentment, the desire, the grief, the shadowy hunger, you transmute pain into power. You become a spiritual alchemist, and this act is not invisible to the universe. It registers, it echoes. You align yourself with a higher frequency, one that vibrates not with denial but with truth. It is not about perfection, it's about integrity. True spirituality is not about appearing light-filled, but about being whole. And wholeness means including the shadow, not excluding it. Light that refuses to touch the dark becomes artificial, but light that emerges from the dark becomes sacred. There is also a profound ethical dimension to this journey. The more unconscious we are of our own shadows, the more likely we are to harm others. Not always through violence, but through projection, control, manipulation, silence. To awaken is to take responsibility. It is to recognize that every action, even the smallest, leaves an imprint on the soul of the world. The mystic knows this. To live unconsciously is to live in exile from the cosmic order. But to become conscious, truly conscious, is to return to the divine rhythm of the universe. It is to live as if every moment matters, because it does. And so the shadow journey becomes a bridge between the personal and the collective, between what you carry inside and what the world reflects back. As you heal, you help heal others, not by force but by presence, by example. The more you embody authenticity, the more others feel safe to do the same. And this creates a ripple. One soul remembering invites another and another, until something ancient stirs in the collective unconscious, a wave of awakening, a quiet revolution, a mystical remembering that we are not separate, not broken, not bound to repeat the same unconscious cycles forever. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is the key. This is the invitation. The journey through the shadow is not the end. It is the true beginning. A return to the self, to the universe, to the sacred pulse of being alive. And now that the seeker has walked through the underworld of the psyche, there remains one final doorway, to understand how. This entire path began through a wound, a silence, a question, and a calling to awaken. Now I want to hear from you. What part of your shadow do you feel is asking to be seen? What did this video awaken in you? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to read. Let's keep this space sacred, supportive, and real. If this journey into the unconscious stirred something inside you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. That's how you make sure you never miss a new message from the universe through celestial truths. And if you're ready to go even deeper, watch the next video appearing right here on your screen. It's a powerful continuation of everything we explored today. And trust me, your soul will thank you. I'm grateful you walked this path with me. Until next time, this is Celestial Truths, guiding your spirit home.